I woke up from a nightmare, consumed by indescribable pain. I thought it was just a bad dream, but as consciousness returned, the pain intensified. I frantically took off my sleepwear, trying to alleviate the burning agony, only to end up helplessly sobbing in the dark. But when I finally made it through the night, I found my body covered in mysterious bruises. Where did these bruises come from? Are they related to the pain inside me? Chapter 5: Pain. Searing, relentless pain. That's all there was, consuming every fiber of my being. My eyes flew open as the most excruciating agony I had ever experienced tore through my body. I made the mistake of thinking it was just a nightmare, but as consciousness flooded back, the pain intensified, becoming almost unbearable. A gasp escaped my lips as the torment escalated. Something within me burned. Desperate to break free, I frantically removed my sports bra and booty shorts, my usual sleepwear, and lay naked on the bed, writhing in a futile attempt to alleviate the suffering. A silent scream ripped through me as the pain reached its zenith. Tears welled up in my eyes. My breathing ragged and labored. I felt the warm droplets cascade down my cheeks as I let out a muffled cry, desperately trying to remain quiet to avoid waking my parents. My breath came in short, sharp pants as I clutched my stomach, the apparent source of this hellish ordeal. The burning sensation intensified, as if my insides were engulfed in flames. Another sob threatened to escape, and I had to clamp a hand over my mouth to stifle the sound. Suddenly, the inferno within began to subside. Though still agonizing, my erratic panting gradually steadied, and the tears ceased their relentless flow. I slowly unclenched my muscles as the burning abated. Removing my hands from my stomach and mouth, I wiped away the remnants of tears from my face. I curled into a fetal position, whimpering from the lingering echoes of pain. As I stared into the darkness of my bedroom, my eyes fell upon the glowing numbers of my alarm clock. 12:17. The blue light pierced the shadows, a stark reminder of how little sleep it managed to get. 3 hours was far from enough, but despite my exhaustion, slumber eluded me. I lay there, anticipating another wave of pain, the embrace of sleep, or something entirely unexpected. None came. 230 from my eyes refused to close. My mind raced, unable to find peace. My body remained tense, locked in its protective curl. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, or if I was waiting for anything at all. 353. Finally, my eyelids grew heavy. My overactive mind began to quiet, and my body slowly unfurled into a more comfortable position. As sleep beckoned, I silently prayed for no more surprises. I jolted awake, then sighed with relief. It was just my alarm clock. The pain, it seemed, had passed. I cautiously rose from the bed, immediately feeling the effects of my meager 5 hours of sleep as blood rushed to my head. Holding my temples, I stumbled towards the bathroom, hoping that whatever had transpired during the night was now behind me. Once I got there, I gasped at what I saw in the mirror. My head was the least of my problems. I had forgotten that I was without clothes, so when my eyes landed on my body, I was surprised to say the least. Bruises, deep black and purple bruises, covered my stomach and thighs. I turned around and saw that there were a few bruises on my lower back and butt. My mouth woodland close as I turned in a circle to see the whole damage. Where did these come from? Did I hold myself too tight last night? Are these the aftermath of that burning feeling? But I was pretty sure that the burning feeling seemed to be coming from inside of my body. I rushed back into my room, making sure my parents did not see me. I didn't bother with a shower and instead used my time to unpack a suitcase filled with my clothes. While I was unpacking, I found today's outfit. I didn't bother dressing up nicer than I would normally. I picked out a light blue tee, shirt that had the Hollister logo in the corner, and a pair of dark wash jeans. I finished unpacking and noticed that I had a little less than 30 minutes until I had to leave in order to not be late for school. I quickly got dressed, wincing when I moved too fast and hurt my bruises, and ran a brush through my hair. I didn't bother straightening it or putting it into an updo. I decided to also not put on makeup. I like to go natural anyway. I grabbed my backpack and walked to the bathroom to brush my teeth. I then ran downstairs and grabbed a Nutri-Grain bar. My mom was already in the car, so I slipped on my black flats and went out into the car. I slid in the car, closed the door, and she took off. I sighed loudly in my seat, almost dreading today. So, I didn't really see you yesterday since you took off to your room after school. I wanted to ask you how your first day went, Mom asked, glancing at me through the corner of her eye while trying to drive. I sighed again. I was working so hard to avoid that topic of my horrible first day. It's not like I can tell them what actually happened. I looked at my mom, a light coming to my mind. Well, which? I didn't talk to many people because I had a bunch of stuff to catch up on. But many people said hello, so I'm sure to make a friend or two today. I forced a bright smile to go along with my lie. She looked satisfied with my answer and smiled as she drove the rest of the way. We pulled up and I took a deep breath. Now knowing what I was stepping into, I opened the door and got out of the car with my backpack on one shoulder. I walked straight to the school again, ignoring everyone. I walked straight to you, history, acting like nothing was wrong. Truthfully, I was terrified. This was my first class with Ashton, and as much as I hate admitting it, I was greatly intimidated. Once I got to my class, I quickly put my backpack down next to my table I share with Ashton. I took out the extra reading assignments and walked up to Mr. Holland. I smiled as I handed them to him. Oh yes, thank you, Evie. I hope that provided a brief background to this course. He asked at the end. Yes. It was very informal. I responded, a little to kiss ass. Why? Okay. Well, I don't think you will need to do any more extra work, seeing as you understood everything in the extra readings, Mr. Holland said, looking at all the assignments I gave him. I smiled and walked back to my seat. As I sat down, the bell rang. Immediately, the class came in and my heart lurched, knowing who was soon to come in. And come in he did. Ashton swaggered in with what seemed as two of his friends who also had this class. A blonde and brunette seemed to notice him as soon as I did. They both got up from their seats and went straight for them. At a closer look, I noticed the brunette was the same one who called me a bitch yesterday. I immediately scowled at her. As much as I seemed to dislike her, Ashton seemed to love her attention. I watched as he whispered something in her, likely sexual, and she giggled. I made a disgusted noise in the back of my throat. Shit. They both glared at me. How the hell did they hear that? I ducked my head, my cheeks probably a deep red color. I glanced at them out of the corner of my eye and saw him grabbing her ass while they had a mini makeout scene. I heard her giggle again and say, okay, I'll see you tonight. Only a stupid person couldn't guess what they were planning on doing. The chair next to me scrapped the floor and I felt a wave of heat as he sat down next to me. I shifted in my seat uncomfortably, knowing that he saw me staring at him and that brunette. He was giving me the cold shoulder, which I had no problem with. The class started and Mr. Holland started droning on about history stuff that no one really cared about. I tried to listen, but found it very hard because I could feel the raw hate coming from Ashton. Why was it hate? I have no clue. I continued to look forward, trying to act like I was listening. I looked at the clock. 30 minutes to go. Wow, this class was taking forever. As I was looking at the clock, Ashton elbowed me in the stomach. I didn't know if it was on purpose or not. Either way, I hissed out in pain. My hand immediately went to the bruise that he just elbowed. I massaged it a little, trying to be inconspicuous about it. I slowly unclenched my jaw and moved my hand away. I turned toward him and gave him a glare. I regretted it as soon as he returned my glare with one that would have the devil running back to hell. My eyes widened in fear and I quickly turned toward the front. That seemed to be the wrong thing to do because as soon as the teacher turned his back, Ashton grabbed my side with his hand and turned me toward him. I let out a gasp of pain as I again looked into his eyes. His hand was holding right where some of the worst bruises were. Listen, he said in a dark voice that had me shivering. I demand respect, and I suggest you don't provoke me or there could be some serious problems. His hand tightened around my side. I whimpered softly in pain. Please let go of me. My hands were clenched and my eyes glanced down at his hand then back up to him. I was sure my eyes portrayed my pain and begging tone. Ashton looked down at his hand on my side, then back up at my eyes. He smirked and tightened his grip quickly, then let go and turned back to the front. I let out a breath that I was holding and I slowly unclenched my hands. The slight pain from his grip slowly died down until it was just a slight throbbing. I didn't dare look at him again. About 20 minutes later, the bell rang and released me from hell. I sighed and put my stuff in my backpack. By the time I stood up, Ashton and the brunette were back in their makeout session. I didn't make a noise as I passed them and left the room. I walked to math. Remembering that there was a test today, I decided to study last tonight so I could try to take the test. Once I got to the class, I walked straight to Mrs. Flemington's desk. Hi, Evie. How are you doing this morning? She said happily. I'm fine, thanks. About that test today, I said, getting straight to business. I would like to try and take it today. Oh, okay. Mrs. Flemington looked surprised at my bluntness. She still handed me the test, which I then walked to my desk and immediately started it. I was so absorbed in my test that I didn't notice someone was trying to get my attention. Hello. He was waving his hand near my face. I looked up from my test and at the boy who now had my attention. He looked somewhat familiar, but I couldn't place him. My cheeks turned pink as I realized he was smirking while I was staring at him trying to recognize him. I squirmed in my seat and looked down at my test. I wasn't even checking him out. Hi, I said quietly. My mind was racing trying to figure out why he was even talking to me in the first place. He was still in front of me. You're in my seat, he said, pointing at the seat I was sitting in. I blushed and started to get up. Not that I have a problem with that. He finished taking the seat next to mine. I settled back down in the seat. I'm sorry, but you look really familiar. Do I know you? I asked him, turning to face him. Oh yeah, I'm in your science class. I said, name's Josh. Josh introduced, holding out his hand for me to shake. Abby. I smiled and took his hand and shook it. Josh smiled at me, a dimple showing up on each cheek. Our hands split apart as the bell rang, signaling class was starting. All right, class. You know today's a test day, so let's get down to business, Mrs. Flemington started to hand out the test that I had already started. Once the whole class had the test, Mrs. Flemington again sat down at her desk while the class started the test. I continued my test as soon as the silence settled over the class. The only noises that were heard were pencil scratchings and the occasional cough. I finished my test and sat back, looking at the clock. I had 20 minutes of class left. I glanced around to find only a few other people who had finished their test. One of them happened to be Josh. I looked over at him and made eye contact. Was it hard? He mouthed. I shook my head no and pointed to him, trying to ask him if it was hard for him. He must have got what I was trying to convey, and he shook his head no. I sighed quietly to myself, looking at the clock. Now it looked like 8 minutes to go. I slumped down in my seat and started doodling on the back of my test. A butterfly, flower, and 2 hours later it was finally 5 minutes until class ended. Mrs. Flemington stood up from her desk. All right, class. Time's up for today. Please pass your test forward. If you didn't finish, please keep your test and talk to me after class to find a time to finish it, Mrs. Flemington explained. I gave the girl in front of me my test and looked at Josh. After the class passed their tests up to the front. The silence disappeared and talking started up again. I was still looking at Josh, waiting to see if he would still talk to me. I was curious as to why he was talking to me because it seemed like everyone didn't like me. So Josh started. Why are you talking to me? I blurted out. My hand snapped over my mouth and I felt my cheeks turn a deep red. I didn't mean to be so blunt, but now that it was out, I was curious as to what he would say. Josh chuckled. Well, there's a way to start a conversation. If possible. I blushed even further. Anyway, he continued. Honestly, you seem pretty cool. I mean, I'm sort of a loner myself, and I kinda picked up the same vibe from you. You, a loner? I asked, shocked. Josh seemed, like he said about me, pretty cool. He smiled. I know it doesn't seem like it. I'm awesome, obviously. Too awesome for anyone here. He said sarcastically. But seriously, I'm not one of those antisocial loners or anything. Everyone's nice to me and whatever, but no one really likes me enough to actually hang with me anytime. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. Should I say that I'm sorry or that understand? My mouth opened and I planned to respond, but was cut off by the bell. Hey, I'll see you in science. Lab a witch, lab partner, Josh said as he stood up from his seat. My lack of response didn't seem to faze him. I picked up my backpack and headed out of math class into communications. Once I got to communications, I decided to sit in the same seat I sat in yesterday. Luckily, it was still open. I sat down and took out Romeo and Juliet. Since I had already this play, the work was easy for me. Class started and Mr. Johnston announced that he had put us into small groups to discuss the first act. I inwardly groaned at the small groups. I was better at working individually. Nonetheless, he put into our small groups and let us discuss and fill out a packet with our groups. Since no one really knew me, my group decided to do a mini get-to-know you session where we all introduced ourselves. In my group were 3 girls named Rachel, Michelle, and Catherine, and 2 guys named Danny and Grant. Immediately, I knew that I would not get along with Rachel, Michelle, and Danny. As soon as I said my name was Evie, they each gave me a spiteful glare and proceeded to avoid talking to me in any way possible. Catherine and Grant, however, were very nice to me despite the obvious tension. We worked together as best as possible considering we were basically split into 2 teams. Class ended and I was extremely glad to get out of there. However, my joy was cut short as I realized that lunch was next. I was smart and brought my lunch again. Leaving the classroom, I again decided to go eat in the library. Sitting in a back corner, I realized why Josh got the loner vibe from me. The bell rang, signaling lunch was over. I packed up my lunch and headed to French class. Another easy class. I was one of the first people here, so I quietly took my seat. The class filled and soon enough class started. I sat back and was only half listening as Madam Cooper explained what we would be learning today. Class was a bore and passed quickly. The bell made me jump as I came back to reality from my half-dream state. Madam Cooper quickly handed out the homework as we all left. My spirits raised as I realized that my next class was with Josh. I leave French class with a smile on my face as I walk to science. Once I get there, I see Josh is already sitting at our lab group. Hey, I say as I sit down. He looks up and smiles at me before pushing whatever he was working on to the side high. How was your day? He asks. I chuckle. Better than yesterday. Except for history. He laughs back. Why, how bad was yesterday? You don't want to know. I respond, trying to avoid it. I break our eye contact and stare at the table like it was the most important thing in the world. Hey, Josh, softly. It's okay. You don't have to tell me. I meant it as a joke. I looked up at him to see sincerity in his eyes as he looked at me. I smile as a response, not wanting to respond. Luckily, Mr. Cole decided to start class, so the awkward silence between us didn't stretch on. Today, like yesterday, he handed out a lab that we were supposed to work on with our lab partners. He let us go immediately and told us that whatever we didn't finish was homework. Josh and I dropped our conversation and immediately started working on the lab. We finished quite quickly and had about 10 minutes left of class. The day was almost over, with only one more class to go. I sighed out loud. Gym was definitely my least favorite class, even worst in history. I frowned, remembering how yesterday's gym class ended with me getting smacked in the face. "What's wrong?" Josh asked, noticing the frown on my face. I looked at him, debating if I should tell him what happened yesterday in the last 10 minutes of class. I figure, what the hell? I need a friend here. I have gym next. And if yesterday is preview of what's to come, then I have a personal devil. I say, waiting to see if he is actually curious or just wanted to start a conversation. Josh seemed surprised by my answer. Wow, who's the personal devil? And what happened yesterday to make it so bad? They'll give you the quick version. I started explaining. It started yesterday when I ran into someone. They obviously didn't like me and told me that a couple times. His followers also told me. Anyway, yesterday in gym, we were playing dodgeball. I wasn't paying enough attention and let's just say I wed face. I finished my little story and waited for his response. He looked somewhat stunned. Josh seemed to make up his mind on what to say. And you're not making this up. I gave him my best R. You. Stupid look, and he held up his hands in surrender. Okay. So who is? Josh asked. For a second, I debated to tell him. I wasn't sure if this would backfire on me or not. It all depended on how much I trusted him. The bell made my decision. I started putting my stuff back into my backpack. Josh didn't move. He kept watching me. "They'll tell you tomorrow," I said as I stood up. I started walking towards the door when I felt a tug on my arm. I turned back and saw Josh holding my arm back. "What?" I asked him, curious on how he moved so fast. "Evie, who is he? Do I know them?" He asked me, seeming very concerned and nervous. I tried to tug my arm back, but he only held on tighter. "Josh, I don't want to tell you right now. They'll tell you tomorrow." I tried again to take my arm back, with no avail. "Evie, promise me you will tell me tomorrow." Now he seemed very nervous about my answer. "Josh, let me go, please," I insisted, still trying to take my arm out of his iron grip. "Promise me, Evie." Josh stared into my eyes with a very serious face. "All right, Josh, I promise," I said, aggravated that he's insisting on a stupid promise. Josh gave a nervous smile and let go of my arm. I hurried out of the classroom, wondering why he was so serious. I walked to gym, my heartbeat increasing with every step. Nervous was an understatement. I got to the gym and went straight to the locker room with my head down. I changed quickly and walked out of the locker room into the gym. Mr. Guy was in the middle of motioning people to the middle of the gym. I walked over and sat down, trying to be inconspicuous. "All right, class," Mr. Guy shouted. "Today is our mile practice day, which means that tomorrow is the day." The class groaned, obviously not happy about the mile. I was too happy, but not too unhappy either. I was terrible at the mile. Hey, enough with the groans. We do it every year, 3 times the year. You all know this. So today, we will be running for the majority of the time. Mr. Guy shouted ass. He is a gym teacher after all. Get to it. He again shouted at us. We all stood up and I followed the class to the corner of the gym, which was probably our starting point. Mr. Guy walked over to the stereo system and plugged in the iPod. The music started and the class took off. We were going at a pretty decent pace and I found that it was easy keeping up with the majority of the class. Eventually the class seemed to split apart. We became 2 groups. The first group, I noticed, consisted of Ashton and his friends. They started jogging faster and eventually were ahead of the majority of the class. I stayed with the second group, knowing that if I tried to keep up with the first group, it'd probably end up on the floor. We were still jogging 10 minutes later. However, half of my group stopped a while ago. I kept on going, knowing that I could keep on going and I didn't need to walk. Ashton's group seemed to have sped up and were now starting to pass the walkers. My heartbeat sped up as I heard them coming closer to me. All of a sudden, a rough hand pushed me, making me stumble and fall on the floor. I quickly held out my arms to catch myself as I fall. My arms hit the gym floor with a thump. My knees knocked against the floor. I looked up to see Ashton and one of his friends smirking down at me as they passed me. I sighed and stood up. I looked toward Ashton and his friend and saw them laughing. I started my jog again. Halfway through class, the only one still running was the first group. Everyone, including me, had started walking and talking to their friends. Hey! Someone shouted from behind me. A sec and later a hand landed on my shoulder making me jump. A girl started walking next to me. Hi. I responded, wondering why she was talking to me. I looked at her, remembering her face but not recognizing her. Catherine. My name's Catherine. I was in your group in honors comm. Catherine said, looking at me expectantly. I immediately recognized her after that. Oh yeah, hi. Catherine gave an exaggerated sigh. Isn't this so stupid? I mean, how is it going to help Power Mile doing all of this dumb-ass running? She complained. I snorted, already liking her and enjoying her company. What? She asked as we kept on walking. Nothing. I laughed. OOMF. A strangled gasp left my mouth as I was again pushed to the floor. This time, however, my arms were too slow to catch me. I looked up to again see Ashton, this time with a girl, passing me and Catherine. They were both laughing. See, never gets old. Ash unchuckled, turning around and speeding up his jog. Are you okay? Catherine shrieked, helping me up. I nodded, not wanting to say anything. Ugh, BGS, such a dickhead. She spit out, looking in his direction. I started laughing at her blatant hatred at him. Catherine looked at me and started laughing with me. Eventually it became hard to breathe and there were tears in my eyes. I sighed and wiped the tears out of my eyes, a smile never leaving my face. Class finally ended and everyone rushed to get out. The final bell rung and chaos erupted. I hurried to get out of the school. My mom was waiting in the car right in front. I quickly hopped in and she took off. I opened my mouth to answer the obvious questions that were about to spill from Mom's mouth, when none came. I looked at my mom to see that she was on the phone. I sighed and sat for the short ride. Once we got home, with Mom still on the phone, I rushed up to my room. I stayed in my room until dinner. Once I finished dinner, I stayed downstairs and watched TV. My parents seemed busy. Today was their first day of work. They both worked in the same office, which was a huge benefit for all of us. By 10, I was ready to go to sleep. My eyes were falling asleep, so I walked up to my room. I got ready and jumped in bed. I pulled the covers up to my neck and closed my aching eyes. A pain. My eyes shot open as I remembered the pain from last night. Would it happen again? I was very hesitant to close my eyes. Eventually, my tiredness won out and my eyes closed and my body relaxed with only one thought in my mind. Will it happen again? Chapter 6. I was in a hallway. This hallway, however, was completely made of wood. It stretched on, never ending in both ways. I turned around again and saw a yellow light down the hall. Hello, I called out. I started to take a few steps toward the light. The only response I got was my echo and the light turned brighter. All of a sudden, I knew what the light was. The fire rushed forward at an incredible speed. I turned around and ran with all I had. Adrenaline pumped through my body as I ran from the fire. My breath started to come out in pants and I found myself involuntarily running slower. The fire nipped at my heels. Its heat consumed me and suddenly I found myself surrounded by fire. I came to an abrupt stop and turned in a circle. The fire surrounded me and it caught onto my clothes. It burned straight through my clothes and started to burn my skin. My eyes shot open. A fire was a dream, but the burning is not. My arms went straight to my stomach and started cradling it. I drew my knees up to my stomach and found myself once again in the fatal position. It started again. Please, stop. I whimpered to the dark room. The fire increased. More so than even last night. Tears started forming in my eyes and soon enough were streaming down my face. The fire ripped through me, burning everything in its path. My breath started coming out in short pants and gasps as it raged inside me. It seemed to be worse tonight than it was last night, though I have no idea how. The thought barely crossed my mind when the most tortuous round started. The temperature increased. The pain increased. The intensity increased. I finally cowed and held it in. A soft scream fell from my lips. Then another. Then another. I was gasping. Small screams emitting from me as I tried to keep the volume of the screams from increasing. My soft screams eventually turned into soft sobs. The fire decreased. It finally stopped, but I cowed and controlled the sobs leaving my mouth. I stayed curled up in the fatal position and cried. Why the hell was this happening to me? Where the hell is it coming from? Questions swirled in my brain as I started to calm down. My eyes stopped producing tears and I was no longer sobbing. I cautiously moved my hand to wipe my wet cheeks. I laid there, like last night, for what seemed like hours. I cowed and fall back asleep. I was terrified that it would happen again. The music from my alarm started playing a while later. I stayed up half the night expecting the fire to return. I quickly pushed the snooze button, but stayed where I was. 10 minutes later, my music started playing again. This time, I pressed the off button and got up. I tipped to the hallway and heard my parents up and moving. I ran across the hall to the bathroom and quickly shut the door. I looked into the mirror. I slowly took off my tank top and pajama booty shorts. I looked at my without clothes body in the mirror. My eyes watered as I took in my appearance. I looked like a vanilla Oreo with chocolate cream in the middle. Up until the middle of my stomach was my normal pale skin. Half of my thighs until my feet were also my normal pale skin. The skin from my stomach to my thighs was a deep purplish black color. The bruises became worse. Sweetie, you okay? Dad knocked on the bathroom door. Yeah, I'm fine. I yelled back. Okay, but you've been in there for 10 minutes. We need to leave in about 20 minutes. I watched his foot shadow from the crack between the floor and the door. Leave. I waited until I heard him walk down the stairs. Then I ran back to my room, holding my pajamas, opening my closet. I pulled out a pair of off leggings and a pair of knockoff Uggs. I walked over to my dresser, opened it, and pulled out a loose Lord of the Rings shirt that I could tie up in the back. I jumped and tugged my leggings on and slipped on my shirt, realizing too late that maybe leggings were a bad idea when my midriff screamed in protest. Taking a hair tie, I tied the back of the shirt in a ponytail and tucked it in the bottom of the shirt. I walked over to the mirror, made sure that you cowled and see the bruises in the back, and noticed dark circles under my eyes. Another reminder of last night. I found my liquid foundation and rubbed it in. Slowly, the dark circles faded until they were almost not noticeable. I grabbed another hair tie and decided last minute that I wanted my hair up, with everything acceptable. And just a few minutes late, I grabbed my Uggs from the floor and ran downstairs. Once I entered the kitchen, Dad gave me a stern look and handed me a Nutri-Grain bar. I kissed him on the cheek, grabbed my backpack, and ran out to the garage. Took you long enough, Mom reprimanded as she backed the car out. I nodded in response while slipping my Uggs on. I swiftly ate my breakfast as we drove to the school. She pulled up and immediately after the car stopped. I opened the door and hopped out, backpack in hand. I closed the door and walked quickly into the school. My stomach and thighs were still hurting, but weren't screaming as much as before. I walked into the school and headed toward history. Hey, Evie, I heard from behind me. I turned around and saw Josh headed toward me. I smiled and stopped walking to wait for him. Hey, Josh, what's up? I said as he caught up to me. We both started to walk towards my class. Nothing. I just saw you walking and wanted to join you, he responded. I looked at him curiously, having an idea on why he really found me. Okay, thanks I guess, I said looking at him. We settled into a silence as we walked. We got to my history class and stopped at the door. I watched him look down at his shoes with his hands in his pockets. Josh looked back up at me. I could see the question in his eyes. Spit it out, Josh, I said, exasperated. I knew what he wanted to ask, but I wanted him to admit it. He sighed. Who is? Evie, please. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Josh stared into my eyes. I opened my mouth to respond when I froze. The body of heat was right behind me. I could see Josh's expression change from a friendly expression to a very guarded one. Josh straightened up and seemed to take a step towards me. "What's going on here?" he asked. My eyes widened as an involuntary shudder ran down my spine. I didn't know how to respond, but I cowed and closed my mouth. I looked in Josh's eyes, begging him to answer. Josh grabbed my arm and pulled me to his side while turning me around to face Ashton. He raised an eyebrow at Josh's reaction. "We're just talking. Not that it matters to you," Josh responded, very hostile. Ashton's eyes hardened and a scowl formed. "Remember who you're talking to." "Josh," Ashton growled. Josh seemed to realize something as his eyes widened and he bowed his head a fraction. Despite the hostile answer to his question, Ashton went into the classroom. I stayed frozen next to Josh. How do I respond to that? I saw Josh look at me from the corner of my eye. "Evie, you okay?" he asked me. Josh stepped in front of me and moved his hands to my hips. I gasped out. Josh had unintentionally put pressure on the bruises. I quickly moved his hands from my side. "What happened?" he asked me, holding his hands up in surrender. The bell rang, signaling that it was time for class. "Math." "Okay," I asked, but didn't let him respond as I rushed into class. I walked to my seat and sat down, making sure I didn't look at him or touch him. I wanted my distance. Class started, and for a while I stayed very conscious every move. I finally started to relax a bit, when I felt hot breath hitting my ear. "So what were you and Josh talking about?" He breathed in my ear. My breath hitched and my heart started pounding. Ashton sat back in his seat waiting for my answer. I realized so late that whispering in my ear was his advantage. I took a deep breath and settled my nerves. Like Josh said, "It's none of your business." I smirked at him. I was proud of myself for answering without stuttering or something stupid like that. His face morphed into a scowl. He clearly did not like my answer. My smirk slowly fell off my face as his eyes hardened and a growl-like noise came out of his clenched teeth. Ashton leaned toward me again and, like yesterday, he grabbed my side. However, today he put both his hands on either side of me and turned my body toward him, forcing me to look at him. His hands put pressure on my sides. I gasped out. Again, as my sides started screaming. My hands flew to his, trying to get them off me. His response was to put more pressure on my hips. I clenched my teeth, holding in my yell of pain. "I told you yesterday." Ashton started. "I demand respect, and there will be problems if you keep disrespecting me." His threat was blatant. "Please let go. You're hurting me," I gasped out, still trying to move his hands. The pain was almost unbearable. "Do you understand me?" Ashton asked out of clenched teeth. I quickly nodded, hoping it would be enough and that he would let me go. Ashton looked at me, an unreadable emotion in his eyes. He arched his eyebrow and slowly moved his hands. Looking back at the front of the classroom, Ashton sat back in his chair and started playing with the pencil on the desk. I openly gaped at him. He acted like nothing happened, like he didn't just blatantly threaten me. I turned to the front of the class and started to rub my sides where his hands were. My eyes scanned over the clock and I noticed that we still had over half an hour of class left. Our little confrontation must have only been a minute. 2 minute stops. For the rest of the class period, I stared at the clock and rubbed my sides. Eventually, the bruises were just probing instead of screaming. The bell finally rang and I quickly hopped up and left the class. I wanted to get to math as fast as I can. When I got to math, Josh was already in his seat. I rushed over to my seat and sat down. "Will you tell me, Evie?" Josh begged. I took a deep breath. "Ashton." I watched his reaction, and was genuinely surprised by it. Josh's whole face hardened. His hands clenched and an inhuman growl came out of his clenched teeth. "Evie, I need you to tell me what he said to you. Exactly what he said. Josh said through clenched teeth. I gaped at him. Josh looked so dangerous and hostile. He looked like he wanted to destroy everything in this room. Evie, he warned. I still gaped at him, but responded. He said that he rejected me as a friend or something. Did he say friend? Or was it something else? Josh asked. His hands were clenched so tight that they were starting to turn light. He said mate. I said quickly. Josh stood abruptly. I jumped at his sudden movement. I looked into his eyes and was surprised to see them darken from their forest green to an almost black color. Josh abruptly left the room. I sat there, staring at the door that Josh just left out of. My mouth woodlinked close. What the hell was that? Class started and Josh didn't return. All through class, Josh didn't return. Not even when the bell rang signaling class was over. I put my math stuff in my backpack and stood up. Josh's backpack was still next to his seat. I didn't know what to do, so I decided to leave it there. Josh would know where it is when he came back. I left math and walked to communications. The question swirled in my mind. Why did Josh act like that? How does he know Ashton? Besides the thing in the hall this morning, I walked into communications and saw Catherine wave at me to come sit by her. I gave her a small smile and walked to her. Hey, Catherine said. What's up, girlie? I gave her a questioning look. Girlie? She shrugged as I sat down. I smiled and looked toward the front. Mr. Johnston was in the middle of explaining. Again, one of the themes of Romeo and Juliet to another student. I think his name was Fletcher. So I asked you what was up. Catherine turned toward me again after talking to another friend. I pondered her question for a couple seconds. Well, which? Well, the sky, some clouds, maybe an airplane. Wait, what do you, oh? Catherine seemed to get my joke. Shut up. I laughed at her momentary stupidity. Wow, I thought with you being at honors, you would get a simple joke. Whatever, Evie. Now answer my question seriously. When you walked in here, you looked like something was bothering you. Catherine looked at me expectantly. I sighed. Nothing really. I mean, my one friend was acting kind of weird in math. Weird like what? She asked. Well, I was talking to him and he must have gotten angry at what I said. Or something. Either way, he stood up and just left. Class started and then ended. He never came back. I quickly wondered why I was telling her this, but realized that I wanted to tell someone. That is weird. Catherine responded. All right, class, Mr. Johnston started class. Let's get back to Verona, Italy. I turned toward the front again. Class went way faster today than yesterday. We didn't have any small groups or any partners. All we did was take notes on the act we just finished. It was a nice break. Class quickly ended and I started packing up. See you in gym, Catherine said as she passed me, heading out of class. I waved by as I finished putting my communications stuff away and took out my lunch. I walked up to the library. Surprisingly, I liked eating there. It's quiet. No one bothers me. And I don't have to worry about that stupid lunchroom drama. Once I entered the library, I went to my spot, sat down, and started eating. Josh's strange behavior came back to me. Why was he acting like that? All I told him was what Ashton said. Josh and Ashton didn't seem to know each other. So why would that bother Josh? Another thing. Where did he go? Josh missed all of math class. Maybe more. I came out of my thoughts when the bell rang. I sighed. None of my questions were answered. I packed up my lunch and headed to French class. When I got to class, I was happy to see a substitute. Substitute meant movie. The movie had to be in French, but it was still a nothing day. I happily went to my seat, ready to do absolutely nothing today. The happiness could be seen everyone's face as they walked into the room. Class started and the sub introduced himself as Mr. Davids. He quickly started the movie. I found my eyelids becoming heavy. I rested my head on my desk and fell asleep. I jumped when the bell went off. Everyone was getting ready to leave. I quickly checked to make sure that there was no drool or anything, and grabbed my backpack and headed to science. Once I entered science, I was surprised to see Josh sitting at the lab. I quickly walked over to my seat and sat down. "Listen, before you ask questions," Josh started, stopping me from asking my questions. "I'm sorry that I left like that. I'm just sorry, okay? Where did you go?" I asked as soon as he stopped talking. Josh dragged his hand down his face. "Nowhere? I just had to leave. Please don't ask again." I looked at him, clearly confused at his answer. Josh gave me an apologetic smile and looked at the front of the classroom. He clearly didn't want to talk about it. So I dropped it, Mr. Call started class a few awkward minutes later. We were to take a pre-test for the test tomorrow to see what we needed to study tonight. I sighed in relief. 15 minutes later, I was done with my test. So was Josh. And most of the class, Mr. Call seemed to notice, and he said that talking was okay again. I looked at Josh, hoping that our awkward moments were gone. He smiled at me. I smiled back and was about to say something when my elbow accidentally knocked our pre-tests over. Oops. I reached down to grab them. "Evie, what happened to your side?" I snapped up, sitting bone straight in my seat. "Our tests were forgotten on the floor." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to be inconspicuous. Josh right through it. He reached over to my side and started lifting my shirt. I slapped his hand away. "Evie, let me see. I won't do anything. Promise," he said, staring into my eyes. Josh started reaching towards my shirt again. I tried to hold his hand back, but Josh used his other hand to hold both of my wrists. I tried to shift away from him, but his hold on my wrists made it difficult to move away. Josh lifted up my shirt and I knew he saw my darkened side. He lowered my shirt and let go of my wrists. When he looked at me, his eyes were darkened again. "What happened?" "Nothing," I said. "Too fast." I knew it was too fast because Josh saw right through it. "Evie," he growled. My heartbeat increased. I didn't know Josh could sound so dangerous. "It's nothing. Josh, please, leave it be. Please don't ask again." I repeated what he told me earlier. Josh took a deep breath and didn't ask, but he wouldn't look at me again. The bell rang and I said bye to Josh, but he didn't say anything back. I walked gym, even more confused about Josh's behavior. Once I got to gym, I changed into my gym clothes and found Catherine. We chatted until Mr. Guy said that we all needed to get ready for the mile. During the mile, Catherine talked pretty much the whole time and I nodded accordingly. My mind would not away from Josh's reactions today. I finished with Catherine, us getting a mile time of 907. We left the gym as the final bell rang. I left the school and found my mom. I quickly hopped in the car and we drove home. She was on the phone once again, so I didn't bother talking. My mind whirled around Josh's behavior. I couldn't get it out of my brain. It was some of the strangest reactions to some of the smallest stuff. I didn't get why Josh was so concerned with me. We got home and I went to my room and put on some music. I sat on my bed with my homework out. I finally started to concentrate on something other than Josh. I did all my homework before studying for my science test. The evening passed quickly. Like today, I found myself in bed, not remembering what I did beforehand. I realized how exhausted I actually was. That explained my temporary memory loss and how I could only concentrate on one thing at a time. I closed my eyes, not caring about what could happen at night. I just hoped and wished for sleep. Chapter 7, Josh's POV. I watched her as she left science class. My anger was boiling over and I knew I was close to shifting. Again, I knew what those bruises meant. I knew something was up between Eddie and Ashton. The confrontation in the hallway was all the proof I needed. However, I had no idea that he rejected her. Outright rejected her as his mate. That was unheard of. That bastard. I knew Ashton was a dick and liked to sleep around. I never knew he could be a downright piece of shit. I clenched my hands as my anger came back full force. For the second time today, I ran out of the school and into the woods right behind the school. No one stopped me. I felt my bones break as I released my inner beast. My clothes shredded as my skin was replaced by chocolate brown fur, the same color as my hair. My hands and feet turned into paws and my mouth turned into a muzzle as I fell forward. You would miss it if you blinked. In my place stood an abnormally large, brown-furred wolf. My wolf. I took off running, putting all of my anger into my stride. I let my wolf take over in our running, not wanting to think about human drama while I run. The only thing I let myself think about was red, hot anger, and those bruises. It fueled me as I ran. I ran and ran and ran, never stopping for a break. I ran until it was dusk. Once night started to fall, I turned around and started towards the pack house. Once I was at the line of trees that circled the pack house, I shifted back. My bones cracked as my human form once again replaced my wolf form. I walked to the back and found the pile of clean clothes we keep in a laundry basket. I pulled out a pair of basketball shorts and headed into the house while I pulled them on. Adrenaline and anger were still pumping through my system, making one hell of a mixture. I walked in and asked the nearest pack member if they knew where Ashton was. They responded that he was upstairs in his room. I said thanks and took off towards the stairs. I ran up the stairs, taking two at a time. I slowed down as I reached the top of the stairs. I walked with a purpose to Ashton's room. I reached his door, took the doorknob, the doshel, and walked right in. Ashton was laying on his bed, watching TV. What the hell? How dare you, Ashton? How dare you just reject her like a piece of shit? The only piece of shit here is you. I shouted at him, not caring who heard. I had Ashton's full attention. His eyes turned blackened with inhuman speed. He grabbed my throat and shoved me against the wall. How dare you? How dare you? Gosh, disrespect me. I am your alpha. Ashton growled. He was eerily calm. However, I could feel the anger rolling off of him in waves. All of it was directed at me. His hand squeezed my throat, so much so that it was getting hard to breathe. Despite my situation, I stared directly into Ashton's eyes, knowing he wouldn't like it. I wonder what your parents would say when they find out you rejected your mate. They won't find out. Gosh. Ashton's deep voice told me he was letting his wolf come out. You don't know what you're doing to her. Ashton, Shess hurting. Shess in pain. Because of you and your dumb-ass decisions. And what makes it worse, she doesn't even know why Shess hurting. Submit. The thought echoed in my mind. I knew it was my thought. Ashton pushed the command into my mind. I held his stare for as long as I could. Submit. It echoed louder and more demanding. I cowed at not listen. I bowed my head and held out my neck to show my submission. Ashton rocked me onto the floor. You won't disrespect me again. Gosh, he said, the command loud in his voice. You won't tell anyone of my mate. Or the rejection. Ashton spit out. I don't want to hear about her again. I don't care if she's hurting. She'll get over it. He continued. My eyes hardened and I clenched my hands. I couldn't believe what was coming out of his mouth. How could you not care about your soulmate? I whispered out. You don't understand. Now do I make myself clear? Yes, Alpha, I said through clenched teeth. Chapter 8. My eyes shot open as my alarm clock rang out. I stiffly moved my hand and pressed the snooze button. I sat up very slowly and carefully, expecting any moment for a sharp pain to strike me. With wide eyes and slow movements, I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I closed the door and turned to look in the mirror. I took off my tank top and booty shorts so I was only in my underwear. Nothing new. I turned my body so I could see all sides in the mirror. Still nothing new. The bruises were starting to heal. Instead of being a deep purple or black color, most of them were now either purple. Instead of screaming out in pain like they would every morning, they were only sore. A smile graced my face as I took in my appearance. I quickly grabbed my pajamas and headed back into my room. My spirit lifted immediately. I walked over to my closet and pulled out a paired arc wash, skimming jeans. I went over to my dresser and pulled out a white frilly lace tank top. Loving my outfit, I quickly pulled out a pair of white dunnies and white bra. Walking back to the bathroom, I grabbed a towel and washcloth. I took a longer than normal shower, making sure that I was very careful by my bruises. I washed my hair with my fruity shampoo and conditioner. Oranges, pineapples, and strawberries filled the space. Stepping out off the shower, I wrapped my hair in my towel and put on my bra and dunnies. I looked at my without clothes, bruised body in the mirror. My temporary good mood vanished as I looked at my bruises. However, I smiled once again at the fact that there was nothing new. I took down my wet hair and pulled out my straightener. I plugged it in and walked back to my room, waiting for it to warm up. Once in my room, I pulled on my jeans and took out my foundation. I looked into the mirror. The shadows under my eyes have decreased in size and color, but still need to be covered. I walked back to the bathroom. The straightener had heated up, so I grabbed a hair clip and clipped the left side of my hair up and out of the way. I started to straighten the right side. Once straightened, the right side of my hair is dry and straight. The red in my hair shines out in the light. I take the clip out and start on my left side. Soon, the left side mimics the right and both sides are dry and straight. I walk back into my room and slip on my shirt. I walk over to my full-length mirror and make sure my shirt falls over my jeans the way I want it to. Satisfied that it is, I walk back over to my foundation. I take my brush and powder and start applying. The sleep circles disappear. Happy with my makeup job, I grab the white flats in my closet, my backpack, and walk out of my room. I walk downstairs to the kitchen. "Hey, sweetie," Dad says by the toaster. "Cha-cha making." I ask as I walk past him to the pantry. "Just some toast," he responds. I grab my normal breakfast of a Nutri-Grain bar and walk over to the kitchen counter. I hop up onto it, with my bar in my mouth, and start slipping my flats on my feet. With them on, I hop down and grab my backpack. "Where's Mom?" I ask, realizing that Chef's not down here. "Your mom got the stomach bug. Chef's not going into work today. They'll be driving you to school," Dad says as he butters his toast. "Oh, okay. I guess it'll be in the car," I say as I walk out the door to the car. The door closes before I hear him respond. I opened the car door and slid in. I buckled my seatbelt and checked the time on my phone. A little bubble pops up saying I have a text. I open the text and see that it's from Kristen. I smirk and read the text. "Why the hell haven't I heard from you?" I laugh, filling the silence. The car door opens and Dad slid in. "Cha-cha laughing at?" Dad asks as he started the car. "Text message from Kristen." I respond. I text her back. "Sorry, new school, you know." I look out the window as we drive to the school. A line of trees rushes past. The never-ending forest. I sigh. I never liked the forest. Too many bugs and wild animals. Dad pulls into the school's parking lot and stops. I open the door, scoop up my backpack, and get out. I walk to the doors and head in. I start walking to class, almost expecting Josh to pop up randomly. I reached my class with no sign of Josh Mr. Hall and looked up from whatever he was working on at his desk. He was probably wondering why I was so early. I'd ignored his look and walked to my seat. I sat down at my table and put my head down. I moved my hand to my side as a twinge of pain ran through it. The board in front of me said that there was a quiz today. I started rubbing my side as another twinge of pain ran through my side. How come I didn't remember that there was a quiz today? Suddenly, fire ran straight through my stomach and I lost my breath. The pain. I immediately cupped my stomach in my arms as the fire continued. My breath started coming out in small pants. I squeezed my eyes shut as it increased, just as it had 2 nights ago. The fire quickly increased until it was practically unbearable. I tried to regulate my breathing so I wouldn't scream in the middle of school. In through my nose, out through my mouth, in out, in out. The fire soared to new lengths and my breathing cut off. I clenched my teeth together and I held in a scream. In out, in out. Someone help me. I couldn't think clearly. My mind wouldn't concentrate on anything except the pain. Then, as if water put out the fire, it disappeared. I kept my eyes shut and my teeth clenched. My arms never moved from my stomach. The pain disappeared and I slowly moved my arms from my stomach to my sides. I moved my head up and was stunned by the light for a second. I looked around and noticed that class started in less than a minute. Where did the time go? There was something on my cheek, so I moved my hand up to wipe it off. My hand came back wet. Tears. I quickly wiped my cheeks with my hands, making the tear trails disappear. I tensed when a body of heat sat down next to me. I let a wall of hair fall down between me and him. A few seconds later, the bell rang and Mr. Holland started talking. I stared at the wall next to Mr. Holland while he talked. Project. Partners. Person next to you. My eyes snapped to Mr. Holland. Please tell me I heard him wrong. He started passing out papers for the supposed project. I didn't stop staring at the spot Mr. Holland was standing in it. I heard a manly sigh next to me. My hair was still a wall between us, and I didn't dare move it. I could feel Ashton's stare in the side of my head. I held my breath. Suddenly, the softest touch I had ever felt pulled on my hair. His hand took the hair that was between us and moved it to over my shoulder and behind my ear. Soft tingles erupted when his hand accidentally brushed the side of my head. My heartbeat increased, whether out of nervousness or lust. I don't know. I sat frozen, unable to move. My eyes never even glanced toward him. I heard him sigh again, and he placed a paper in front of me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ashton start writing on his paper, making slow, stiff movements. I moved my head so I was looking down at my paper. I moved my hand to grab my pencil and slowly wrote my name. So I think we should do our project on the Civil War, Ashton said, turning toward me. I could see him out of the corner of my eye. I decided not to move. Hey, Evie. A shudder ran down my spine at the sound of him saying my name. Are you going to say anything? His eyebrows turned down into a frown. I still didn't respond. Evie. He growled out and I jumped at the deepness of his voice. My head snapped toward him and my eyes immediately found his. His eyes weren't his normal ocean blue, but instead a night blue. Were you crying? Ashton asked. His voice back to normal and almost sounded concerned. I coughed at him. My first response. Like you care? Sure, I would be fine doing the project on the Civil War. I retorted and started looking at the details on the project. Ashton didn't respond. The sheet said that we need to each have a 2-page paper on our topic. Along with the papers, we needed to create a poster board on our topic. On the poster board, we need a timeline, an important person, an important event, pictures, and a summary. We would need to present our poster board to the class. This was all due in 2 weeks. I sighed. I hated partnered projects. I did the best on my own. Not to mention, but it also sucks when your partner's an ass. He finally responded. I don't. Of course not. So I expect it to be done on time and I want to see it before you turn it in. Make sure you make note cards and give them to me before we present. Ashton continued. Wait, what? Is he telling me to do the entire project by myself? It's a partner project. I stressed the partner part, that's that sentence. The hard look in Ashton's eyes returned as he looked at me. Well, I don't want to be your partner. I think you know the obvious reasons. My mind went back to the first day. And my time is too valuable. I have lots of stuff to do. And this isn't one of them. I gaped at him. Completely and utterly unbelievable. It took a second to get my thoughts together. until a thought came into my mind and I knew I had him. Then I'll just explain to Mr. Hall and that my partner won't do any of the work. I'll let him deal with you. The quotations were obvious. I was smug with my answer, but the feeling quickly left me after Ashton's eyes turned black. I suggest you don't do that. He growled out. A deep guttural sound. You don't want to get on my bad side. So this was it. I gulped and looked down. The threat in his voice lingered after he finished talking. We stayed in silence for the rest of class. Everyone around us was talking about their projects and how they're splitting it up. I, meanwhile, was trying to find a way to get everything done in the amount of time I had. Ashton, on the other hand, was texting on his phone. A little deduction work found that he was texting the brunette in the front of the class, who seemed to be very happy with whatever they were texting about. Class ended and I left with a headache. How the hell was I supposed to do everything? I walked to math, my mood lifting a little in anticipation of seeing Josh. When I got to math, he was in his seat. I found this surprising. He was usually in class before me. I walked to my seat and sat down. Too soon. Class started and Josh still was here. I sighed. Math was going to be boring. My headache increased as math continued. I couldn't concentrate for very long. I found myself staring off into space for long periods of time. Luckily, I was called on. Class ended, finally, with the ring of the bell. I stood up and quickly walked to my next class. My headache kept increasing with every step. Once I got to communications, dizziness struck me. I had to stop myself from falling over by clutching on to the door frame. Are you okay, Evie, Mr. Johnston asked. He was looking at me like I was about to fall over. Yeah, I sighed out. I let go of the door frame and took a step into the classroom. Dizziness rushed over me, and I stumbled. No, you're not, Mr. Johnston said. Concerned. Go to the nurse's office. Evie. No, I'm fine, Mr. Johnston. I tried to argue as I regained my footing. It was a suggestion. Go to the nurse. Then go home. Mr. Johnston softly commanded. I sighed, loving the idea of going home. I turned around and headed to the nurse's office. The nurse, Mrs. Swanson, agreed with Mr. Johnston and said that I needed to go home. She contacted my dad after I told her that he was work. Mrs. Swanson hung up a few minutes later saying that my dad is coming to pick me up in about 10 minutes. I said thank you and walked to the front doors of the school. About 15 minutes later, Dad pulled up. I walked outside to the car and immediately slid inside the car. Dad immediately left as I laid my head against the cool window. Sweetie, are you okay? Dad asked as he looked over at me, clearly concerned. I think I just need sleep. I responded with my eyes closed. He left it at that. When we got to the house, Dad pulled up the driveway and opened the garage door, but he didn't get out of the car. Sorry, sweetie. I need to go back to work. Get some sleep. He kissed my forehead and I left the car and walked into the garage. As soon as I opened the door to the house, I closed the garage door and walked into the house. I went straight upstairs after I put my backpack on the couch. Once upstairs, I stopped by my parents' room to check on my mom. She was sleeping, so I left her be. I quickly walked to my room and hopped into bed. Exhaustion hit me suddenly, and my eyelids shut automatically. Sleep washed over me and I sighed out in content. I fell into the deep abyss of unconsciousness.